The great crystalline cities of Myria Prime glowed with a diminished light, their once brilliant bioluminescent towers now flickering weakly in the depths of the planet's vast ocean. Deep beneath the surface, in the central chamber of the Myrian High Council, First Speaker Nyra's fins trembled as she reviewed the latest environmental readings. The numbers confirmed their worst fears. Their world was dying. The acidification has reached critical levels, she announced to the assembled council, her voice carrying through the water with a resonance that belied her exhaustion. Our atmospheric processors can no longer compensate for the changes in our ocean chemistry. At current rates, our waters will become uninhabitable within 5 cycles. The council chamber, usually alive with the subtle movements of 24 of the most powerful Myrians, fell still. Their serpentine bodies, evolved over millions of years to thrive in the planet's deep oceans, hung motionless in the water. Each council member's iridescent scales reflected the dim light of their failing city, creating a haunting display of colored shadows on the chamber's ancient walls. We have petitioned every major civilization in the Galactic Assembly, Second Speaker Cole said, his ceremonial fins drooping. The Arcturians have the technology to stabilize our oceans. The Zenith Commonwealth could easily replicate our atmospheric processors. Even the Vega Collective, with their mastery of planetary engineering, could solve this crisis in days. His gills flared in frustration, yet they all refuse. Nyra understood their reluctance. The Myrians, despite their ancient culture and deep understanding of oceanic ecosystems, were seen as a declining power. Their civilization had chosen to perfect their relationship with their ocean world rather than expand across the stars. Now, when they needed help most, the great spacefaring races viewed them as primitive, a dying species not worth the investment of resources. There is one more option, Third Speaker Vera interjected, her luminescent patterns pulsing with uncertainty. We detected a civilization on a water-rich world in the spiral arm. They're primitive by Galactic Assembly standards. They've barely reached their own moon. But they've been broadcasting into space for over a century, and their messages. She paused, her fins rippling with emotion. They speak constantly of exploration, of helping others, of overcoming impossible odds. Humans, Nyra said, the word feeling strange in her mouth. You're suggesting we ask humans for help? The chamber erupted in a flurry of movement and color, council members' bioluminescent patterns flashing in agitation. The suggestion seemed absurd. How could a species that hadn't even mastered faster-than-light travel help save an entire planet? I have studied their transmissions, Vera continued, unwavering. They face similar challenges on their world, rising ocean temperatures, acidification, dying coral reefs. But instead of accepting defeat, they fight. They innovate. They have developed technologies and techniques that, while primitive by our standards, show remarkable ingenuity. Nyra felt the weight of her people's future pressing down on her like the crushed depth of the deepest trenches. The logical choice would be to continue petitioning the advanced races, to offer more resources, more concessions. But logic had failed them. Perhaps it was time for something else, something uniquely human. Hope against all reason. Prepare a transmission, she commanded, her bioluminescence pulsing with authority. Send them everything. Our situation, our research, our failed attempts at restoration. But most importantly, send them our story. If these humans truly value exploration and discovery as much as their messages suggest, let them see us not as a dying civilization, but as an opportunity to prove what their species is capable of. As the transmission was prepared, Nyra swam to the chamber's observation window, gazing up through kilometers of increasingly toxic water at the shimmering surface far above. She had read that humans had a saying about drowning people grasping at anything that might save them. How fitting that their species, born in the oceans and now dying in them, would reach out to a young race on a distant water world as their final hope. The message was sent, broadcasting across the light years toward Earth. The council chambers emptied, leaving Nyra alone with her thoughts and the quiet hum of their failing city. She didn't know if the humans would respond, or if they could help even if they wanted to. But as she watched the weak light play across her scales, she felt something she hadn't experienced in a long time. A small flicker of hope, burning like the bioluminescence that had once made their cities shine so brightly. Little did she know that at that very moment, in a deep-sea research station off the coast of New Zealand, a human marine biologist was about to receive a signal that would change the course of both their species forever. Dr. Sarah Chen stared at her computer screen in the cramped confines of the Tangaroa Deep-Sea Research Station, 3 kilometers beneath the Pacific Ocean. For the 5th time, she played back the decoded alien transmission. Each time, the implications became more staggering. "You're telling me," Dr. James Rodriguez said from the station's common area, "that not only have we made first contact, but it's with a species that basically lives like we do down here." The veteran marine biologist gestured at the reinforced walls, holding back the crushing ocean pressure. "Not exactly like us," Sarah replied, her eyes never leaving the complex chemical diagrams the Merians had included in their transmission. "They've evolved to thrive in these conditions, but their problem." She pulled up a graph showing the rapid deterioration of the Merian oceans. "Their problem is surprisingly familiar." Within hours, the revelation of alien contact had reached every major government on Earth. The UN Security Council convened an emergency session, and scientific institutions worldwide began analyzing the vast database of information the Merians had shared. "They're dying," Sarah explained to the hastily assembled panel of world leaders, speaking via video link from the deep-sea station. "Their oceans are experiencing a catastrophic chemical shift, similar to what we're fighting in our own seas, but accelerated 1,000-fold. And the advanced alien civilizations they asked for help, they all refused." "Why come to us?" the Chinese representative asked, voicing the question on everyone's mind. "We can barely manage our own ocean crisis." "Because we're still trying," Sarah responded, her voice firm. "Look at the data they sent about these other civilizations. They've all abandoned their homeworlds, spread across the stars. They've forgotten what it means to fight for a planet's survival. But we haven't. We're still here, still fighting for Earth's oceans. That's exactly what the Merians need." The debate raged for days. Earth faced its own environmental challenges: rising seas, warming oceans, dying coral reefs. How could humanity justify diverting resources to save an alien world? But as the Merian data was analyzed, something unexpected emerged. Their technologies, while different from ours, could revolutionize our own ocean restoration efforts. Dr. Rodriguez explained to the panel. "They've mastered fake control on a molecular level. Their biological engineering could help us revive dead zones in our oceans. By helping them, we help ourselves." In labs and research stations across Earth, scientists began identifying parallels between Earth's marine ecosystems and Meria Prime's ocean chemistry. The Merians' desperate plea had arrived at precisely the right moment, just as humanity was developing the tools and techniques that might save both worlds. 3 weeks after receiving the transmission, humanity sent its response. The message was broadcast from every major radio telescope on Earth, carrying the combined voice of a species that refused to let another world die. "People of Meria Prime," the message began, "we hear you, we understand, and we will help." Project Deepwater was established within days, an unprecedented global initiative combining the expertise of marine biologists, climatologists, engineers, and physicists from every nation. The goal wasn't just to save the Merians. It was to prove that humanity's greatest strength wasn't technological superiority, but the unwavering determination to face impossible challenges. Sarah found herself appointed as one of the project's lead scientists, her experience in deep-sea environments making her uniquely qualified to understand the Merian perspective. As she reviewed the preliminary plans for humanity's first faster-than-light vessel, designed specifically for this mission, and based partly on simplified principles found in the Merian transmission, she couldn't help but smile at the irony. The advanced races wouldn't help because they thought the Merians were too primitive, she said to Rodriguez as they prepared to leave their deep-sea station for the surface. They never considered that sometimes the best solutions come from those still struggling with similar problems. The first human ship to break the light-speed barrier would not be a warship or an exploration vessel, but a rescue mission. As humanity mobilized for its greatest challenge yet, the message they'd sent to Miria Prime continued to travel through space, carrying with it a promise that would reshape the understanding of both species. No civilization deserves to face extinction alone. In the depths of their dying oceans, the Mirian High Council received humanity's response. First speaker Naira's bioluminescent patterns pulsed with an emotion she had almost forgotten. Hope. The species that had barely reached their own moon was coming to help. And somehow, deep in her core, she knew this was just the beginning of something much greater than mere survival. The human vessel Nautilus emerged from its faster-than-light journey in the Merian system, its hull gleaming with the distinctive patterns of experimental metamaterials designed to withstand extreme oceanic pressures. Inside the ship's main laboratory, Dr. Sarah Chen watched through reinforced windows as the azure world of Miria Prime grew larger. "Beautiful," she whispered, taking in the sight of the ocean planet. No continents broke the endless expanse of blue. The Mirian civilization existed entirely beneath those waves. But the beauty was deceptive. Instrument readings confirmed what the Mirians had reported. Their oceans were dying. The welcome they received in the crystalline depths of the Mirian capital was both awe-inspiring and heartbreaking. Thousands of Mirians lined the underwater streets, their bioluminescent, but perhaps the most significant breakthrough wasn't technological at all. As humans and Mirians worked side by side, they began to understand each other in ways that transcended their biological differences. The humans' determination and creativity complemented the Mirians' deep understanding of oceanic systems. Together, they were achieving what neither species could have done alone. "We were wrong," Sarah overheard a Mirian elder telling Naira. "We thought we needed the most advanced technology to save our world. Instead, we needed partners who understood what it meant to fight for a planet's survival." As the first phase of their project showed promising results, news began to spread through the galaxy. The same advanced civilizations that had dismissed the Mirians now watched with growing interest as this unlikely partnership achieved what they had deemed impossible. But neither humans nor Mirians celebrated yet. They had won their first battle, but saving an entire planet's oceans would require more than one victory. Still, as Sarah watched human and Mirian scientists working together in the gradually brightening waters of the test zone, she knew they had discovered something more valuable than any technology. They had found hope in collaboration, strength in diversity, and wisdom in understanding that sometimes the best solutions come from those still learning to solve their own problems. The emergency alarms pulsed through the waters of Miria Prime's capital city, their urgent rhythms cutting through the usual bioluminescent patterns. In the Central Science Facility's main control chamber, Dr. Sarah Chen watched in horror as the holographic display showed cascading failures across the planet's primary restoration network. "The living barriers are dying," Kello reported, his patterns flickering with distress. "The chemical reaction has mutated. It's spreading faster than the barriers can adapt." What had started as a triumph was rapidly becoming a catastrophe. The initial success of their restoration project had led to a planet-wide implementation, but something had gone wrong. The same living barriers that had shown such promise were now failing across entire regions of Miria's oceans. "It's the pressure," Dr. Rodriguez realized, analyzing the data streaming in from their monitoring stations. The deep ocean installations are creating unexpected interaction patterns. The barriers aren't just failing. They're accelerating the problem. The situation deteriorated rapidly. Within hours, entire sectors of the restoration network had collapsed. The toxic zones they had worked so hard to clean began to expand again, now worse than before. The Mirian High Council convened an emergency session, and for the first time since the humans had arrived, Voices began to suggest that perhaps the advanced civilizations had been right. Perhaps their world was beyond saving. But Sarah noticed something strange in the data. "Look at these readings from the failed barriers," she said, pointing to a particular pattern. "The chemical signature. It's not random. The barriers aren't just dying. They're changing." Kello moved closer to the display, his scientific training allowing him to see what she was suggesting. "They're evolving," he said, his patterns shifting from distress to intense focus. "But not in the way we intended." The human Mirian team worked frantically to understand what was happening. They discovered that the living barriers, designed to be adaptable, had begun to evolve in response to the extreme pressures of the deep ocean. Instead of fighting the toxic elements, some had started to incorporate them into their structure. "It's like extremophiles on Earth," Sarah explained to the council. "Life finds a way to survive in the most hostile environments by working with the conditions, not against them." But understanding the problem didn't immediately lead to a solution. As more barriers failed, the situation became desperate. Several Mirian cities had to be evacuated, their populations crowding into areas that were still safe. The strain on resources and morale was reaching a breaking point. It was during this crisis that humanity showed its greatest strength. Instead of retreating from the challenge, more human scientists and engineers volunteered to join the project. When their pressure suits couldn't handle the deeper waters where they needed to work, they developed new ones. When traditional solutions failed, they improvised. "We didn't come across 20 light years to give up now," Sarah announced during a joint session of human and Mirian scientists. "So the barriers evolved in an unexpected way. Then we evolve our approach too." The next weeks were a blur of activity. Human and Mirian scientists worked around the clock, studying the mutated barriers and developing new approaches. They discovered that the evolved barriers, while no longer functioning as intended, had developed remarkable properties that could be harnessed. "They're not failing," Kello realized during one late-night research session. "They're showing us a better way. The ocean isn't just a system we can control. It's alive, and it's trying to find a new balance." This insight led to a radical shift in their approach. Instead of trying to force the ocean back to its previous state, they began working with the changes. They developed new barriers that could channel and direct the natural evolution of Miria's oceans, guiding them toward a new, stable state. The advanced civilizations that had been watching their efforts were baffled. In their pursuit of perfect technological solutions, they had forgotten something fundamental about life itself, its ability to adapt and transform. The human Mirian approach, born of necessity and desperation, was achieving something unprecedented: the controlled evolution of an entire planet's ecosystem. As the new network began to stabilize, signs of hope emerged. The toxic zones started to shrink again, but this time in a more natural, sustainable way. The waters began to clear, though they would never be quite the same as before. Mirian coral analogues adapted to the new conditions, creating strange but beautiful new formations. "Your people continue to surprise us," First Speaker Nara told Sarah as they observed the progress from the council chamber. "When everything seemed lost, you didn't just persist. You helped us see our crisis in a completely new way." Sarah watched the patterns of light playing through the recovering waters, now streaked with new colors from the evolved barriers. "That's the thing about humanity," she replied. "We're at our best not when we're winning, but when we're facing impossible odds. Because that's when we're forced to imagine solutions no one else would think of." The crisis wasn't over. Implementing the new approach across an entire planet would take time and face its own challenges. But as human and Mirian scientists worked together in the changing oceans of Miria Prime, they knew they had discovered something profound. Sometimes, the greatest victories come not from conquering nature, but from learning to dance with its chaos, finding harmony in adaptation rather than control. 5 years after the Great Crisis, the oceans of Miria Prime pulsed with new life. In the highest chamber of the newly restored crystal spire, Dr. Sarah Chen stood beside First Speaker Naira, watching schools of evolved barrier creatures dance through the waters outside. Their bioluminescent patterns created an ever-shifting aurora in the deep, a living testament to the transformation of their world. The galactic assembly arrives tomorrow, Naira said, her own patterns reflecting the gentle rhythms of the ocean. Many of them still don't understand what we've achieved here. Sarah smiled inside her pressure suit, now a much more elegant design born from years of human-Mirian collaboration. They're looking for the wrong things, she replied. They expect to see the old Miria Prime, restored to exactly what it was. Instead, we've helped create something new. The planet's oceans had indeed become something unprecedented in the galaxy, a carefully guided evolution of an entire ecosystem. The toxic elements that had once threatened to destroy all life had been incorporated into new biological systems. The waters were different now, but they were alive, thriving, and more resilient than ever. But the transformation went far beyond the physical changes to Miria Prime. In helping save the Mirian civilization, humanity had gained far more than they had given. The collaboration had accelerated human understanding of oceanographic sciences by centuries. The techniques developed to save Miria Prime were already being adapted to help Earth's own struggling oceans. The latest reports from Earth are promising, Sarah said, pulling up a holographic display showing the recovery of Earth's coral reefs. The modified barrier technology has helped restore nearly 60% of our damaged marine ecosystems. The Great Barrier Reef is thriving again for the first time in decades. More profound than the technological exchange was the change in how both species viewed their place in the galaxy. The Mirians, who had once resigned themselves to a quiet decline, had rediscovered their role as masters of ocean ecosystems. Their scientists were now sought after by other worlds facing similar crises, their expertise in adaptive environmental engineering becoming legendary. Humanity, for their part, had proven themselves on the galactic stage not through military might or technological superiority, but through their unwavering determination and ability to imagine solutions where others saw only failure. The same advanced civilizations that had dismissed them as primitive now sent observers to both Earth and Miria Prime, studying the unprecedented partnership that had emerged between the two worlds. The assembly's going to be very interested in our latest project, Naira said, her patterns shifting to show excitement. The latest project was ambitious even by their new standards. A joint human-Mirian initiative to develop new methods of planetary restoration that could be adapted for any world, any environment. They still think we succeeded because we found some clever technological solution, Sarah replied, shaking her head. They don't realize that the real breakthrough wasn't in our technology at all. It was in learning to see failure not as an endpoint, but as a beginning, Naira finished. In understanding that adaptation is not a weakness, but the greatest strength of all. The human-Mirian partnership had created ripples throughout the galaxy. Other younger civilizations, inspired by their example, began to speak up and offer their own unique perspectives on galactic challenges. The old hierarchy, based purely on technological advancement, was giving way to a new understanding of civilization's potential. As if to emphasize this point, a group of young Mirians swam past the chamber window, followed by their human students. The exchange program had been Kelo's idea, bringing humans to study Mirian ocean science, while Mirian scientists spent time on Earth. Each group learned not just the other's scientific knowledge, but their way of seeing the world. Sometimes I wonder, Sarah mused, watching the students, what would have happened if the advanced civilizations had helped you instead of us? If they had simply used their technology to fix everything. We would have survived, Naira replied, her patterns thoughtful. But we would never have learned to adapt. Never have discovered that sometimes the most powerful solutions come from working with change rather than against it. She turned to Sarah, her patterns forming the complex symphony that humans had learned meant deep appreciation. Your people taught us that strength isn't about having all the answers, it's about having the courage to find them, no matter how impossible the odds seem. Outside the window, the barrier creatures continued their dance through the transformed waters of Miria Prime. Their light played across the rebuilt structures of the city, where human and Marian scientists worked side by side on new challenges. In the depths below, the next generation of both species learned together, each growing stronger through their differences. The next day, the Galactic Assembly would arrive to evaluate what had been achieved on Maria Prime. They would see a world transformed, a civilization renewed, and a partnership that had changed the very nature of galactic relations. But most importantly, they would witness the living proof that sometimes the greatest achievements come not from those with the most advanced technology, but from those with the courage to imagine a different way forward. As the lights of the city brightened with the approaching night cycle, Sarah and Naira remained in the chamber, watching their shared legacy unfold in the waters below. They had not just saved a world, they had shown the galaxy a new way of facing its challenges. And in doing so, they had written a new chapter in the story of both their species, one that would light the way forward for generations to come.